And for this week, we're going to dive into some more concrete examples and application of SNA. And there are 3 different goals in this week. The first one is to examine some concrete examples that I recommend, and also some of them could be those you select. So I want to build some kind of choices for you to select those ones that will be useful for you. And the second part, which is after you read or examine critically the example you pick, present the example to the class so that other people can get a gist of the example you select. And finally is to watch each other's presentation of the example and take ideas from each other to inform your own project, so that we're not only doing the presentation for the class, instead we're doing the presentation for ourselves and also watching other people's presentation to inform our own work. So it's kind of building knowledge together and also informing each other's work together. So I think that would be very informing and mutually beneficial, and I also look forward to learning from your presentation in the class. And so for the next part of the video, I'm going to explain how we're going to do this different parts of this week together. To begin with, the first part or the first page of the class is actually about 2 examples I selected outside of the class, and you're going to get into details by watching through the videos I picked or embedded in the page. The first one is about how trees talk to each other, which is mind-opening to me. You're going to watch this video, which is a TED video, very, very inspiring. And the second video is a more kind of a more concrete research presentation you're going to experience in any kind of research conference. And it's also very interesting and fascinating, and it's more specifically about SNA applied in a specific context. So I hope you enjoyed those 2 videos, and also feel free to post your responses or your reactions either through Hypo on this page or in our Slack space. So that's the first part of the week. And the second part, which we're going to get into more details, is about the activities we're going to do in addition to watching the videos. And the first part is, as typically we do, is reading some chapters and journal articles. And the first reading is the chapter number 10 of our textbook. And the reason I picked it because this chapter actually deal with very specifically pretty broad concept of social capital. And some of you already mentioned social capital in last week's reading. And I think this is a very interesting theoretical perspective or theoretical framework that some of you might find useful. And in this book, you can find, when you're reading through this chapter, you can find the author has a lot to offer in this topic. Maybe the author has used this in her own research. I think it's his own research very substantially. So you will find actually a very detailed review of the history of social capital and many different kinds of application of social capital in education. So even though this might not be specifically connected with your research, I still encourage you to skim through this chapter so that you can get exposed to a cluster of research in education that's based on a very established concept and also very rooted in the application of SNA to study this concept or to study specific phenomenon or sub-concepts under social capital. So it could be interesting for a quick read, and you don't really need to engage too much if you find it not super relevant to your work. And the second reading, which you're going to dive into more deeply, is something you can choose from this list. as you can see, I provided a list of readings. Most of them are from journals about specific examples of SNA in education. So you can actually choose one of the readings from here by selecting this reading and make an annotation. So you can say, I claim this one. So after you post that, other people will not pick that one because you already can't claim this article. And then you can engage with this article for this week. Or I think which might be even more beneficial is to search one article by yourself that's specific relevant to your own research. And just to demonstrate some possibilities, you can actually search on, for example, Google Scholar, which I use a lot. Google Scholar. And then you can actually search, for example, I tried this, social network analysis and parent network, just to show some possibilities. And you can get a bunch of articles from this search. And then you're going to pick one of the reading that interests you, because not all of them could be relevant. And I require the article you pick to be empirical investigation instead of some more general or theoretical piece that might emerge from the list. So, for example, this reading or this article about parents, social networks, and beliefs as predictor of parent involvement could be relevant and sounds empirical as well. So you are going to actually open and download this article and check whether that article will be relevant to this class. So, for example, you can click on this one to download the article, or I already actually opened it up in my browser. So you can see, okay, the abstract is actually telling that this is something that the researchers are collecting data and analyzing the data and try to do some kind of prediction using this data. So this is an empirical piece that you can use. So just to zoom out again, as you're going to select an article either by claiming one from the list here or searching for one from your own research area. And then you're going to examine it and with a very critical attitude. For example, you're going to actually think about different levels of consideration presented in the reading, like how the authors are thinking about social ties and how the author are treating different actors involved in the research, and how the author are treating social network analysis. Is it only about using a measure to quantify something, or is it about a systematic way of doing SNA research that's guided by some kind of social perspective? So you're going to actually think about this when you're reading this article. And after that's done, the next part of this week is to share and take. And by share, I mean after you read and examine the article you pick. So I'm not talking about the chapter of social capital, but more the article you pick, the empirical piece you pick to examine closely. After you're done with reading and examining it, you're going to make a presentation, which could be either a video screencast or a Slack post, which you did last week. And in this specific presentation, you're going to cover some specific areas, which include what's the research problem, what are the research questions, and how the authors collected the SNA data, and also specific use of SNA in the article you picked, and some key findings that you find either illuminating. For example, you didn't realize social networks of parents could actually be useful for this kind of investigation before. And it could be something you watched in the earlier video I included was the egocentric network of patients could contribute some additional insights for researchers to identify this patient who needs support. So those kind of interesting findings you can highlight in your presentation and share with each other. And finally, you can do one praise or one push. For example, you find one part of the article really, really interesting, and for example, very close alignment between theoretical perspective and the use of SNA, and you just find it very beautiful. The research is beautiful. That could be one of the things you can comment on or praise on. And the second, you can do a bit push. For example, if you didn't find the use of SNA convincing, you find some the data collection troublesome, you can actually point out them as well. So that's a second part after you read the article, is to share by making either a video or a post and then share to the class on Slack. And finally, I encourage you to take ideas from each other. For example, after you post, you're going to also check other people's posts, check other people's videos as well, and I encourage you to think how other people's posts would inform your own personal projects, because we're learning from each other in this class, and there might be potentially ideas you can borrow in other pieces of work to inform your own work. So when you're doing this, please comment on each other's posts to either acknowledge what you learn from each other, or to, in case there's any kind of question you want to ask, you can feel free to seek clarifications. So that's a general overview of the this week's activities. And I also want to mention that please try to read and share by the end of Friday, so that other people can have some time to actually watch your presentation or read your presentation, make comments, and do some kind of interactions on Slack. That'll be most beneficial so that we don't jam everything together on Monday. And so I hope this will be a very, very interactive and an informing week for every one of us in the class. And I hope you stay warm as well. Take care.